Welcome, everyone, and happy Thursday. This is, of course, Talent Experience Live, covering everything that you need to know in talent acquisition, recruitment, talent management, and, of course, human resources. Tom, we around these parts like to say that Talent Experience Live is the greatest show on the internet,
Yes.
better than your favorite podcast. So it's awesome. I'm happy to be back. Tom has held down the fort for the past month at this point, past couple weeks, chatting all around talent marketplace and employee experience. And of course, the Talent Experience Live Show is brought to you by the good folks here at Phenom, myself and Tom included. Stop me if you've heard this before, but our purpose is to help 1 billion people find the right job. And we do that with one small show every single week. We do that through all of the products that we produce, the events that are coming up, Tom, the newsletters that go out. Shout out to LinkedIn if you are watching. You definitely want to subscribe to the Phenom newsletter that is live on there now. And of course, the next question that makes sense is what is talent experience and intelligent talent experience management? And of course, that is a platform that helps candidates find the right fit faster, employees evolve in their current role and beyond. We're going to talk about that today. Recruiters achieve next level productivity and efficiency, as well as managers get better insights with data analytics and automation for their teams. If this interests you at all, or even just a little bit, head on over to phenom.com if you are interested. Tom, the bills are paid. The intro is done. A lot of people don't know this. I took a month-long vacation while you were holding down the fort. I wish that was true. But what did I miss? I certainly didn't take a vacation, but I know I missed some great things that you were doing here.
You took a brief vacation, right?
I did travel to London. Yes.
You did go abroad. How was that? Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I hope.
It was. It's a little challenging. A lot of people don't know this, but to travel with a 16-month-old child overseas or on an international flight, it's not for everyone.
Yes.
It may not be for me. But nonetheless, we did have a great time while we were over
fun.
there. Yes.
You conquered. You came back. Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Mm-hmm.
I really want a soundboard for TXL because as you were paying the bills and talking about all the things that intelligent talent experience can do, I want the DJ air horn sound effect so I could just blast that like boo 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 boo.
Yes.
I think that would be amazing.
Yes.
So Justin Devitt, who's our producer of the show, I know he's here. He's not on camera, but he's here. Let's see if we can get that in the budget for 2023. A soundboard that we can have in the studio for some fun special effects. We like to have fun here, as everyone knows, and it is the greatest show on the internet at 12 p.m. Eastern on Thursdays. So we like to kick things off with an icebreaker. So if you are tuning in today on LinkedIn, YouTube, Facebook, let us know in the chats who you are, where you're tuning in from. If you have any questions, hit us up with any questions. We'll be happy to answer those. I have a question today. So what we're going to do today is a good old fashioned clip show, right? And anybody who is a fan of TV sitcoms in the 90s and the 2000s, I guess in the 80s too, you'll know that every once in a while, they don't really do this as much anymore, but they did this all the time when I was growing up. Every once in a while, you would have an episode that is just a bunch of clips from previous episodes. And I really think it's because they had to hit a quota of episodes and the writers in the writers room got a little lazy. So they would come up with some premise for a clip show and they would run it. Devin and I are not lazy. So don't get the wrong idea. So today's icebreaker, right, is what is your favorite TV sitcom of all time? So do you have a favorite TV sitcom? And it could be past, it could be present. Hey, it could be future, if you're looking forward to something on TV. And I'm talking about sitcoms. I'm talking about good old fashioned sitcoms. I don't want to see Westworld. I don't want to see any of those HBO series, Succession. I want to see Family Matters. I want to see Step by Step. I was a big Full House fan growing up. So I'm going to go with Full House. I think Full House is probably my favorite TV sitcom. But Devin, I'm going to turn it over to you. Do you have a favorite TV sitcom?
I do. I do. The one that jumps out at me right off the bat is Seinfeld, and they did a clip show for almost their final
They
episode that
did.
was aired, and it's just reminiscing, which I think is very fitting because we're reminiscing over the past month. But I love Seinfeld. I think the jokes they stand up to this day,
Yeah.
and it gives me, even though I wasn't old enough to live some of the experience that Jerry Seinfeld was living throughout that show,
Sure. Yeah.
I can look back on it now as a 31-year-old and get a little nostalgia of like, man, I kind of wish I grew up in the 90s where I could be George Costanza and come up with a funny little jingle for my answering machine
Yep.
or something
Yeah.
along those lines. But you said Family or Full House. Did I have to ask? Did you watch the remake or Fuller
I
House,
I
the new
I
one?
watched the first season of Fuller House. Yes, I did,
Okay,
and I thought it was
didn't.
I thought it was good, but it didn't quite have the magic of the original. So I think there's a time and place for those types of things. One of the other things I really liked about TGIF. Thank goodness it's Friday, so the TGIF lineup was amazing. Step by Step, Full House, Perfect Strangers. Every once in a while, because they were sponsored or owned by Disney, it's like parent company. So every once in a while, they'd have these Disney World episodes where they'd have some crazy premise where they all went to Disney and they'd have some amazing things happen at Disney World. And I always remember watching those and then begging my parents to take me to Disney. So we've got some great comments here. Family Ties, Full House, Seventh Heaven, Gilmore Girls, Friends. Maggie says Friends. Fun fact, I've never seen a full episode of Friends. Jennifer Thomas says, "Who's the boss?" That's another oldie and goodie. Love that one. So what we're going to do today is we're just going to continue talking about TV sitcoms for the next 30 minutes. Devin, are you cool with that?
Yeah, that totally works for me. I'm well prepared. I'm well
Yes.
versed in this field.
Yes. As much as we'd love to do that. And hey, maybe we found our side gig, our side show that we can spin up where we just talk about pop culture and the zeitgeist. What we're here to do today is we're here to have a clip show, right? And what we're going to showcase are clips from our employee experience series. So if you've been following TXL, we've kind of moved to a seasonal approach where every other month we're putting together thematic episodes, right? We're really trying to be very intentional with the way that we create and design the programming for the show. So if you tuned in, I guess it would have been October, September, October,
October.
recruitment marketing, right? So that was our first kind of approach here, right? With this approach. So we had an entire season, 4 episodes dedicated to recruitment marketing. And then what we did the past month is we dove into employee experience. What's going on with talent marketplaces? What's going on with learning and development? What's going on with diversity, equity, and inclusion? So we really recruited some amazing guests to dive into this topic. And then when we come back from the holidays, we'll be preparing our next kind of mini season, right? So they're not a season in the traditional sense of, like a quarter, summer, fall, winter. We're doing this every 2 months. So we're really, again, being super intentional. So I'm obsessed with all things employee experience. So Devin tapped me and said, "Hey, do you want to host these shows?" And I said, "Of course." So it's been my pleasure to kind of jump into this full throttle, right? So we initially were going to kick off the series with an interview with Ashley Blackmore from Newell Brands. Now she has been super involved with Phenom. She's a Phenom customer over at Newell. She's been on many different things that we've produced, from virtual events to previous TXL episodes. So she's a huge friend of the show. Like many people, she was sick, right? So she got sick. I feel like we've all gotten sick at some point in the past couple of months, but she was sick. So we pushed that back. And we were lucky enough to be able to jump on just you and I. And I think we just rambled for like 45 minutes. I do not recommend anyone go back and watch that episode because I don't even remember what we talked about. I just felt like we were just rambling, much like what we're doing right now. Don't worry, we'll get to the clips. So we're not going to play any clips from that first episode because it was Devin and I on the fly, just making it happen because the show must go on. But episode 2 did air, and that was with Todd Tauber. So Todd is the SVP of strategy at Degreed. Great episode. Devin, did you catch that one?
I did. I loved that episode. It talked a lot about the correlation between learning and development and employee experience. And I know Degreed is a partner, but Tom, you love all things employee experience and talent marketplace related. What exactly does Degreed do for those of us at home who may not have caught the full episode?
Yeah. So if you're not familiar with Degreed and with Todd and the work that the team's doing over there, so Degreed is a learning and upskilling platform. So they are an LMS or LXP. They play in that space, and they are a partner of Phenom's, a friend of Phenom's, and they do such an amazing job creating an experience that really takes learning beyond just your traditional take a course. Get a certification, so I think we have a traditional sense of what learning and development is, right? From the many years that we've worked. And they're encapsulating all of that, but they're taking it a step further in a lot of different ways. In addition to that, they do some great research, right? So they put out a reports called How the Workforce Learns, and they'll revisit this every 2 years, right? So it's tracking kind of the evolution of how learning and development is changing in our space. And that was really the basis for the conversation that we had. In that, Todd shares, and Todd is in charge of this report, right? So he does all the research, he helps craft the report. He shares the 4 conditions for creating a positive learning culture. We dove into that in this episode. But just to talk about kind of the research and kind of how it came about and how they approach it, let's play our first clip from Todd.
So the idea behind the research is people don't value what they don't see. And when people think about learning in the context of work, we're conditioned to think about training, right? An educational experience, a teacher in front of a class or a course, on a screen. And the sort of big insight that led to the creation of Degreed, right, and the fundamental difference between Degreed and a lot of other learning products out there is the recognition that a lot of what people do and the way that they do it on a more consistent every day, every week basis habitually to develop themselves is through things like reading and watching videos and listening to podcasts and connecting with communities, right? That's the sort of, we call that everyday learning. And that experience was largely missing from L&D. So that's what Degreed brings to the table there.
Yeah. Tom, I loved this episode. I know you mentioned they come out with the report every 2 years, and I think that's so important because we've talked multiple times about how skills and their shelf life is only around 5 years. So for them to do this sort of research around learning and development, around culture and creating that learning culture, I have to ask, how does this play into skills and essentially skills shelf life when we're talking with Degreed around a learning culture?
Yeah, skills, as you mentioned, are constantly changing. We had a TXL episode with MZ Burning Glass. They changed their name to Lightcast, I believe. So they're now Lightcast. And we talked all about this idea of skills, degradation, right? And how skills are disrupted quite frequently, right? So the skills that you previously needed to be successful in a role, it's not just the shelf life. Like it's really like the way that they're changing. So like even an existing skill will change in nature, so like the skill's the same, but like how you approach the skill or what the skill actually is or means now will change, right? So if you said you were a social media, like if you had social media marketing as your skill 6 years ago, that means something totally different than if you say social media marketing as a skill today, right? Because of how social media has changed and how marketing has changed. So there's definitely so much that has changed and transformed. And when we think about skills, they really are kind of the building blocks, the connective tissue that really connect us to the work that we have to do or the work that we do. And when we think about the technology that drives a platform like Phenom, where we're matching candidates to jobs or we're matching employees to jobs, or any opportunity. It doesn't have to just be a job. It could be a gig, right? It could be the right mentor. We are really looking at skills and competencies as those building blocks. We'll talk a little bit about the webinar that we just had with Josh Burson and Cigna. But Josh said something in that webinar that I really appreciated. I really loved. He said that skills and competencies are, I'm paraphrasing a bit, but skills and competencies are basically metadata for people, right? So metadata for people. So Devin, when you hear metadata, like what do you think of? Like what?
I think of the larger scheme of things, right? I
Yeah.
think of everything being cohesive almost to an extent. Am I way off on that?
No, you're right. I think what you're saying is like, what is the makeup? Like, what is the
Yeah.
makeup of all the things, you know? And I think that skills and competencies allows us to see that composition at the high level, right, for the full enterprise, and then at the individual level. You know, one of the things I think of a lot is music, right? So if you have an album or a song, there's so many attributes that you could assign, you know, to that specific song, right? Like you could say that it's rock, right? But like maybe like it's more appropriate to say metal, right? Or maybe it's more appropriate to say like doom metal, right? You can go deeper and
Yeah.
deeper and deeper. You can get more specific. You can layer it. And then also like how does that song make you feel, right? Like is it a positive song? Is it an uplifting song? Is it a relaxing song? A somber song? You know, so you can really take one piece of music, one song, and apply almost an infinite number of attributes to it, you know, whether it's genre based or emotion based. And I think what, you know, Josh was saying when he talks about skills being the metadata of people, that's part of it. You know, it's like, how do you take each individual and apply that same layer of classifications, right? And the same layer of compositions. Um, and then when you think about technology like a title or Spotify that can take that data and do amazing things like, hey, it's Tuesday morning. I bet you'll like this song because on Tuesday mornings, you typically work out. And when you work out, you like to listen to this high energy music. You know, I've noticed that because I'm technology and I have AI and machine learning under the hood doing all these things. We can now start to do that with people, you know, and I think it becomes really, really interesting. So I love that, you know, we talked about upskilling, we talked about skills, and it's reinforced in all the conversations that we had throughout the month. But one of the things that Todd really touched on, and we'll hear this in the next clip, is how do we be cognizant of upskilling and improving our skills, right? And making sure that they're fresh and making sure that we're learning what we need to learn to be successful. So why don't we roll that clip and then we can keep the conversation going.
So we give users control over that real estate in a way that I don't think a lot of other products do. Right?
Awesome.
You can select what we call focus skills, for example. These are the things that I want to work on right now. I might have 30 skills attached to my role, right? But I only really have time to work on a few at a time. I want to focus my attention. And by selecting those focus skills, it tweaks the algorithm, makes better recommendations that are more targeted at those things. Another thing that I'm really excited about is the connections that we have to talent marketplaces like Phenom. What we've seen loud and clear is that where clients have those systems connected, and where we have opportunities showing up in the flow of people's feeds of learning recommendations, when they can see how the learning connects to the opportunities that get them excited, they're more active in terms of learning. So they consume and complete more content. They're sharing more stuff with their colleagues. So they're building the culture, they're promoting learning. And they also volunteer more information about themselves, information about the skills they believe they have, at what level they think they have them, but also what they're interested in learning next, right? So it's not just looking backward, but also an opportunity to look forward and see who's sort of making progress towards some of those goals.
Devin, so I have a question for the whole audience, right? So I'll ask anybody who's tuning in on LinkedIn, what type or types of learning get you excited? Like when do you feel excited and when do you get energized when you step back and realize like, hey, I'm really leveling up or I'm really diving deep into this one area and getting better, right? And getting the knowledge I need.
So this is going to sound almost ridiculous off the front, but I enjoy learning through YouTube, Tom.
Yep.
With what I do on a regular basis, I use Adobe products. And for anyone who uses the Adobe suite, no two are the same. There are things in different places all over the place. And if I can't figure out what I'm trying to do, I hop on over to YouTube University and follow it step by step with that content creator. And what really gets me excited is the next time I try and do something like that, and I don't have to pull up that video from YouTube. Occasionally I'll need a refresher here or there, but I've noticed that type of learning trickling into all different aspects of my life. We have a TikTok page here at Phenom, and I follow a couple content creators that offer tips and tricks for Adobe Premiere, for Adobe Photoshop. And Tom, you'd be surprised to see the number of likes that those get or the number of favorites so that people can save them, because I think everyone wants to be educated. They want to learn. They want to level up, but they want it in their own way, right? I think very few people, because to your point, the world is changing so fast, are able to access a textbook, are able to access a webinar. Even if that webinar may be, a year old, it could be outdated at that point. So long-winded answer, but that's what gets me excited, is learning in real time and then applying that in the future and having it for the long run.
Yeah. It's like, hear it, see it, do it. Like that is such a amazing kind of way to learn. And we see people learning from listening to podcasts, on their commute to work. And to your point, just diving into YouTube tutorials and really seeing it firsthand and then actually doing it. Jennifer in the comments, Maggie in the comments, anybody who's joining us on LinkedIn, how do you like to learn? Like, what is your favorite way to engage in learning? What excites you the most?
What's yours, Tom?
Yeah, I like to just do it. I think it's helpful when you have a mentor or a peer who has done it already to really help you kind of get through that and help you do it. I'm always a big fan of teach a man to fish. Just teach me how to fish. I don't need you to give me fish. I don't need you to fish for me. Teach me how to fish, and I'll go do it. And I really like that. So I like being taught. I like doing stuff hands-on, and I like kind of doing it. Since being a homeowner, I would say YouTube has been my best friend, right? Because anytime there's something that's I feel confident enough to fix, YouTube is immediately like my go-to destination, and it's short and sweet and to the point, and it has bookmarks, and it's like perfect, right? So I'm with you. Like, YouTube is definitely helpful, and I love the satisfaction of doing it myself, learning, doing it. Like, to your point, like, you don't have to go back to the video the next time. Like, that's a good feeling, so I really love that. I always like to ask guests, what they're excited about, what excites them in their field. And I asked Todd this, right? So I asked Todd, like, what are you most excited about in the learning and development space? And here's what he had to say. So let's roll this final clip from Todd.
In learning, a lot of the last 10 years were about content. And content is interesting. We all kind of see it and feel it and touch it.
Sure.
But it's been commoditized largely. And it's on its own not enough to do what we want it to do anymore, right? People are drowning in too much content. And so what's exciting is, I think, the way organizations are starting to think about putting data to work through AI and ML, through integrations, right, of systems to create new kinds of experiences, automation. There's a lot of really exciting stuff happening, and data's at the center of a lot of that. That's what gets me excited about learning.
Sounds familiar, right, Devin?
Yeah.
Data being at the center, AI, ML, and getting super excited about it.
It's exciting. And what it makes me think of, and this is completely off the wall, maybe off topic a little bit, Tom, but have you ever been playing a video game at first couple hours or whatever, and there's tutorials, and as you get more and more acclimated to the video game, some of those tutorials begin to see themselves out, right? It's like, oh, they've figured out how to jump. We don't have to teach them that anymore.
Yeah.
And it sounds like that's what Todd is excited about, applying video game skills development into the
Yep.
workforce, right? It's, hey, they figured out how to, set up a campaign. Maybe we don't have to show them that, but we do have to show them how to filter specifically to what they're looking for, right? And
Yeah.
as they grow those skills.
And it makes it so much easier for the end user, right?
Yeah.
To your analogy of video games, I'm gonna have a back in my day moment, right? But back in my day, Devin, when I was playing video games, we didn't have a tutorial stage. Our way to learn the video game was to get 1,000 game overs, right? Like you just continue to get game over until you figured it out, right? And I think there's there's a saying like there's hard and then there's original Nintendo hard, because like those games were just incredibly difficult, right? So
Yeah.
but yeah, like things have changed, right? And now video games, experiences, learning and development, it's all really starting to design it being centered around designing an experience that is incredibly valuable for the end user and helps them get to their destination faster without all the pain, right? Without 1,000 game overs, right? We don't want you to make 1,000 wrong career moves, right? We want you to be on a journey and a path that's unique for you. And I really appreciated Todd's response, talking about data, talking about artificial intelligence, machine learning, because I'm personally excited about that too. And we are very excited about that here at Phenom. So also this month, just before Thanksgiving, we had a demo day event, Experience Phenom Talent Marketplace. And we had a bunch of sessions. We'll talk a little bit about that towards the end, but we had Laura Kantorovich on. She's our director of product for our employee experience product. And she walked through Phenom's Talent Marketplace and she explicitly showed and showcased how the skills data, how the competency data is really driving personalization and automation throughout the entire employee experience, right? And I think once you see that personalization and once you see some of the automated steps that happen, you start to feel that gamification. You start to feel that that pleasantness, of being able to discover your next opportunity or discover that next step in your career. And every employee is getting a unique experience based on, to Josh Burson's point, their metadata, right? Their unique composition of like, what are your interests? What are your skills? And it's really awesome. So we'll drop a link in the comments or the recap for this so that you can go check out the sessions for Experience Phenom, because I think if you want to see this in action, that's one of the best ways to do it, right? Just drop in, check out the demo. It's not super long. And you start to see some of these pieces coming together, the learning and development integration, how the employee profile really drives a lot of this. So after this episode with Degreed, with Todd, we hosted an interview with Granite Construction's Jorge Cazada. So Jorge is the vice president of people and culture. He was incredibly inspiring. Devin, you and I had a pre-call with him months and months ago, and I just remember walking away from that super energized and really excited for that episode, right? And he delivered. He really delivered. It was a great episode. I asked him what he was grateful for because it was right around Thanksgiving, and that was the icebreaker question. And he said something that I'll never forget. He wakes up every morning and he's grateful for the opportunity to be victorious. I love his word choice there, victorious, because it's so specific, but also undefined and ambiguous. It's one of those things, right? Where like, it when you see it, it when you feel it, but he's not really wrapping it up like in too many goals, like my goal every day is to do 50 reps. Like, no, my goal is to be victorious, right? And like, that's awesome. So in the conversation, we really covered a bunch of different ways that you can create that foundation of belonging, that foundation of inclusivity at the organization. And it's not easy. It really requires some of those hard conversations.
Yeah, no, I loved our pre-call conversation, Tom, and also I loved listening to George talk about everything around Granite, and also a little bit of his upbringing. He sprinkled in a couple nuggets there around Santa Cruz, talking about Tony Alva, Lords of Dogtown, brought me back to my childhood. I'm glad that I wasn't hosting this episode because I would have talked about skateboarding the entire time, almost like we talked about sitcoms this whole time. But
for sure,
Granite's unique, Tom, right? Typically, when we have guests on the show, they're very focused on knowledge workers, right? We don't often have too many conversations with folks who are working with frontline workers, especially when it comes to employee development. And that's a glaring miss, right? When we think of employees as a whole, we have to think of knowledge workers and frontline workers and everyone in between, and how we all yearn for that growth. So I want to ask you, what can you share a little bit about Granite and what makes their situation unique?
Yeah, I think you really hit it. There's two things that excited me about the conversation with Granite, and Jorge just reinforced. One is exactly what you said, right? So when we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion, a lot of times I think our minds go to in the office. You know what I mean? Like, what is the office culture like? What is kind of that knowledge worker culture like? And that's not necessarily the case with Granite. It is to some extent. They have those roles, right? But a lot of it is happening on job sites, right? On work sites, construction sites. You know, so I think there's a lot of natural bias that we have when we think about construction, when we think about work sites, when we think about that area of work. And it was awesome because Jorge was able to tackle that with us directly. The other thing that I think was really significant about the conversation with Granite, and something unique about Granite, is they turned 100 years old this year. So I'd have to go back into the archives, Devin, but I'm not sure that we talked to an organization that is 100 years old yet. Can you think of any off the top of your head?
BMO, and I remember
BMO,
that conversation because I think they were celebrating 250 years, I want to say,
Okay,
and it was all around digital transformations. But nonetheless, it doesn't happen
BMO.
often, Tom.
Let's send BMO some type of prize, right? Because I don't think anyone's going to beat them anytime soon.
No.
Yeah, so 100 years old, you know, so they have a history, you know, they have a legacy, they have a lot to talk about, and they have a lot to build on. So I thought that was pretty awesome.
No, it certainly was. And one thing that you mentioned there, Tom, which was one of my favorite takeaways from the conversation, was we were challenged to think of what someone working in the construction field would look like, and kind of open up our own unconscious bias. But I've heard this example before for multiple different industries, multiple different folks, and it gives you some time to self-reflect. I want to ask you, Tom, that was something where I could self-reflect. What was one of the key takeaways for you in this conversation? We talked about a couple there, but was there anything that really jumped out you want to share with the audience?
Yeah, for sure. We didn't really talk about it in these terms, like using these exact words, but one of the things I took away from our conversation was diversity and inclusion. It's really kind of a muscle, you know, like it is something that is going to grow and decay over time. Like, it's going to be in a state of flux, and you have to work on it, and you have to exercise it, you know, just like you would your muscles. And it's not really like a static ideology or principle that you just throw on a landing page or on your career site core values page. Like, it's really something that you have to practice. And Jorge talked a lot about this. So I'd love to just play this clip, because he gets into this a bit in this first clip with Jorge.
I was doing the same things that I was doing for the last 25 years. But in this moment that I had here with Granite, it gave me the opportunity to take a look at, as I was doing the diagnostic that you need to do, what was important for us to actually practice. And we landed on practicing inclusive diversity. And the reason why that was so important, you know, if all of us can close our eyes and think about, describe a construction worker, right? We're not going to be, maybe some of us are not going to see a woman, maybe we're not going to see a person of color. But yet we needed to be inclusive of that white male. And so in the conversation, we realized that what we needed to be was inclusive of all the diversity that we had at the company today, at that time, who we wanted to recruit, and what did we aspire to bring. So that was my early charge as the VP of People and Culture. You have talent acquisition, and I also have workforce compliance. So it's a very, I have a 360 view into the people that are coming in, the environment that we want to create in order to keep them, retain them, and develop them, and also be a voice of the representation and how do we communicate it, how do we report it, and how do we show the things that we're doing around this work.
I love that clip. The reason why it stood out to me is how often do you hear, and Jorge said this, about a white male being talked about as an area for opportunity in diversity, equity, and inclusion and belonging? It's not too frequent, but
Yeah.
it's to your point, it's a muscle that we have to work, right? Depending on your organization. As we talked about at the top of the episode, things are constantly changing. Learning and development is changing. DEI and B is also changing, and you have to continue to work at it because things change and our biases come into play. Am I way off there?
No. And we've had conversations with Christina Cole about diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging as well. We've had conversations with other experts, and I think just the way that the acronyms change, right, and the way that the definitions and how we talk about these things change is an indication, that it's constantly evolving, and we should constantly be living this practice, not just redefining the words, but actually redefining how we approach it and how we talk about it and how we address some challenges that we have. And one of the challenges that I noticed specifically with Granite, and I asked Jorge about this. So I was asking him a question about safety, because for any construction company or organization, like safety is a big thing, right? And when you think about safety in construction, you're thinking about it at the literal level, right? You're thinking about it like you want to make sure that every work site or job site is safe for everybody that's involved, especially your workers and the people around. But what I noticed was they had safety for all on their core values page as a core value, right? They have inclusion on their core values page, but they also had safety for all. And I liked that they had for all on there because I thought that was inclusive in itself. It could have just been safety, but they included for all. And I thought that was really awesome. But I was asking him specifically, like, for him, does safety go beyond physical safety? Like when he thinks about that core value, when he thinks about safety, when he thinks about safety in the context of Granite, does it go beyond just the work site or the job site safety? And here's his response. Let's play this next clip.
So if you take a look at the work that was done at Google around Project Oxygen relating to psychological safety,
yep.
and when you ask that question, my brain goes to, to answer it that way, that it does. It extends beyond the physical safety that's needed. But in order for us to have that physical safety, there has to be a level of trust, collaboration, understanding that if you and I are on the work site, Tom, I got your back, you got my back. And if we see something that's not right, the ability to speak up so that someone can listen. The reason why safety became such a big thing and in our 5 core values, and I'm going to lean over here because we have a quote by Pop Wilkinson that says, as our company, this is what we say, boldly contending for which is right and firmly rejecting which is wrong. So we get the inculcation that takes place, right? The intentional reminder that that's what we're here to do, and safety is something that we practice. And so when you saw that with those core values, yes, it leans from the physical safety outside of the work site to anywhere at Granite or anywhere even with the community.
Tom, I love everything that Jorge is saying. And one thing that I know we're going to get into in a moment, but when he says safety for all, he means it. And he gets into the pronoun conversation a little bit later. You notice his pronouns in the clip. But to our evergreen kind of topic is these things keep changing. Acronyms keep changing. The way we address folks keeps changing. What I want to ask is how do we continue to have hard conversations in the workplace? At some point, when we talk about safety for all, it includes your mental health and your mental well-being, right? And some of these conversations are hard for individuals to have. How do we continue to have those conversations, even though they may be a challenge?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to let Jorge answer that question in the next clip. But I think, you know, personally, like, this was a really challenging episode. I think, Devin, you can probably relate to this too. Like, as hosts of the show, and we frequently do this type of content. We do webinars here at Phenom. We're occasionally called upon, you know, to be facilitating a challenging conversation, you know. And if you noticed in the video clip, I had a bright light shining on my forehead. I was looking extra white, extra pasty that day, you know. So it was really amplifying that I'm a white male, you know, like it's who I am. And I think, you know, when you have conversations like this, you know, me and you, Devin, we're two white males talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion, it could feel a little uncomfortable or a little awkward. But I think it's important to just keep having the conversations, having hard conversations, even if they're challenging. Even on the episode, you know, we talked about my own biases. We talked about the murder of George Floyd. Like, we talked about difficult, hard things. There was a LinkedIn Live that I tuned into yesterday with our colleague Cliff, VP of Strategy, and he was talking about mental health, and he was talking about things that were deeply personal to him, you know, in a live forum. And I think that all of that is just very important, right? We just have to step outside of the comfort zone, and continue to have the conversations, even if they feel like we've already had them, because the conversations change. We have to continue to have them. But let's hear what Jorge had to say about kind of keeping these conversations ongoing and evergreen.
Our brain wants to keep us in that comfort zone. And the reason why it's easy not to continue the discussions is because we get dopamine for staying in that comfort zone. That the minute we go into that fear zone, it's uncomfortable. It, you know, like we're not growing to have the discussions. So it's the companies that continue to do this with the cadence, not letting the attention wane, are the companies that 5 years from now, and we say this at Granite, 5 years from now, a woman's going to be like, I gotta go work at Granite. That is the most inclusive place in construction for women. That's where I want to go. That's how companies are going to be defined in the future, I believe.
Sure.
By the environments that we create, the environments that we sustain, so that instead of having these episodic things dictate how we should act, then that we're ready for it.
He brings up an excellent point on taking a stance, right? And I remember, Tom, at this point, it was probably late summer. We had a conversation with Nancy Grace Stockybaum around how to have conversations around societal and cultural shifts, things that were happening all around us. At that time, there were some court rulings. Companies were taking a stand, and I think this has completely flipped the working world on its head a little bit. In years prior, as we grew up, companies always wanted to play it safe. No one ever wanted to upset any different party. And it seems that now, if you do sit on your hands as an organization and you don't take a stand for what you believe is right and what, most importantly, your employees believe is right, it could hurt you in the long run. And it sounds like what Jorge is doing at Granite when it comes to DE&I and B, it's something that they want to take a stand for. It's something that they want to be known for. And if folks aren't okay with it or don't necessarily agree with it, that's fine, because it's what they believe in as an organization.
Yeah, I want to encourage everyone to go back and watch that full episode, because Jorge, as you can see, is just such an amazing speaker, very eloquent and you know, well read. I think he's just super knowledgeable on all these topics. But to your point about taking a stand and wanting to take a stand, it is 110% authentic, and you feel that when you have that conversation with him, and that's very important too. And we know that, right? Like, you can't just create a diversity, equity, and inclusion landing page on your career site and have a bunch of stock photos and just some nice marketing language and lingo. Like, you really need to live and breathe those values, right, and practice it, as we talked about earlier. So yeah, definitely check out this full episode if you have the chance. I thought this was a great one.
Tom, any final thoughts on the episode before we hop off? It sounds like one of your favorite that we've ever done on the show. So any
we've
last
done so many.
little... We have.
Between
We
the two
have.
of us, we've done so many. And I think even this conversation, Devin, is really exemplifying how much content we've created with Talent Experience Live and how many conversations we've had, because we just keep referencing previous episodes. Like you just referenced our conversation with Nancy. I referenced the conversation with Lightcast, MZ Burning Glass, talking about skills degradation. So if you're interested in any topic in HR, like there's a likelihood that we have multiple episodes on it. So check out the archives. But final thoughts on this one. I'm going to reference another episode that we did with Christine Kenzie, right? So we had a conversation with Christine Kenzie, and we talked all about the concept of unlearning. And Christine is really, really well versed on this. She did an internal presentation at Phenom all about unlearning that I thought was phenomenal. So I said, hey, come on Talent Experience Live and let's have this conversation. So Christine joined us, and we talked all about unlearning. And I want to bring that up because we had that full episode, but it was something that Jorge brought up as well too. So for this final clip on the Jorge episode, let's listen to Jorge talk about unlearning.
Everything about inclusive diversity is about helping people unlearn what they've learned, relearn, and then help them feel comfortable that they should always unlearn to relearn to learn. Because it's always evolving. This work is always evolving. You think about the conversations that we're engaged with now. I mentioned justice. How about the use of pronouns, right? I identify as he, him, his. There are some people that feel some kind of way about using pronouns. But then there are some people that by me identifying myself and sharing my pronouns, I've created an opportunity for someone to feel like they're part of this conversation that we're having today. Right. And so, but that takes unlearning.
I love it. I knew we were going to share that pronouns clip, and it's one of my favorite, and it's a little thing that someone can do hopping on a Zoom meeting. I should have done it today. Or, sending out an email, whatever that may be, putting it in your signature to make someone feel inclusive. But Tom, those are all things that individuals can do on their own. I want to ask you, as we talk about the grander idea of employee experience with technology like Phenom or a talent marketplace, how can we weave some of these things that Jorge talked about into those technologies?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the immediate things that comes to mind, as you know, is employee resource groups, right? And making sure that you have a platform that can support kind of the organic creation of these types of business affinity groups or employee resource groups, where people can come together to support each other and support a specific cause or mutual interest, and have the conversations, give them a safe place to have these conversations. It's especially important as the workforce becomes more distributed. So you're not always in the same building. It's especially important when you have headquarters in multiple states, multiple places. You can really bring the whole workforce together with a solid set of employee resource groups. We had a couple of great webinars on this, so there's a lot of resources over at phenom.com if you want to learn more. And we have a new feature that we really appreciate, which is called Connect in our talent marketplace. And what this does is it gives you the opportunity to connect people to people based on interests, based on discovering people maybe outside of your department. And you can just set up a quick lunch date, virtual or in person. You can set up a coffee break, and just really find people throughout the organization and connect with them, right? And start to build those relationships that are really meaningful. So we have a lot of that functionality built into the talent marketplace. So it's not just about finding a job, right? Like you go there to find your place at your organization and feel that sense of commitment that your organization cares about you, cares about your career, cares about your sense of belonging, cares about your community. And you can build all that into the talent marketplace. So we did cover that a lot in our Experience Phenom demo day, which we'll drop the link in here, of course. We are running up on time. This feels like, those podcasts that are like 3 hours long. Like most of the podcasts I listen to are like 30 minutes, but I know there are a few like sports podcasts, and like, I don't know if Joe Rogan is 3 hours, but I know it's a long show, right? It's a pretty long show, right?
Yeah. I've heard. Yeah.
Yeah. So I've heard too. I'm not a listener, but I've heard the same. This feels like it's going to be one of those 3-hour shows. We'll try to keep it snappy and wrap it up soon.
Yeah.
But yeah, to tie things up in a nice bow with the Jorge episode. Again, as I mentioned earlier, check it out. It's a really fantastic one. And then we were lucky enough to capture that interview with Ashley. So I mentioned earlier we had to postpone our first episode with Ashley Blackmore from Newell Brands. But we were lucky enough to book her for an interview, which we also played at Experience Phenom. So you'll catch it there and you'll catch it on TXL as well. And she has done such an amazing job implementing a talent marketplace. She actually did it, right? So this isn't, talent marketplaces are not conceptual. She actually did it. She did it at her organization and has had a ton of success.
Yeah, it's Tom, it's not conceptual. People are doing it, but I have to ask, what prompted that? Was it something that they, just thought would be a good idea at Newell Brands, talking about such a large organization such as them? I doubt that was the case. So were there specific challenges that they were facing that said, hey, we need to implement a talent marketplace and sooner rather than later?
Yeah, and it's funny because it's a similar theme that we heard from Effie from Cigna in our recent webinar with Jess Elmquist and Josh Burson. So they really wanted to, at Newell Brands, make those internal roles, those internal opportunities more visible to the internal employees, right? So it was really difficult for internal employees to see, without just going to the career site, what opportunities might be available to them, right? So they wanted to create kind of that red carpet experience for employees so that they can get aware of everything that was available to them, and also the steps that they can take to be more qualified and help get those roles if that's the direction they wanted to go in. And as you mentioned too, Newell Brands, they have so many different brands. So Yankee Candle, Sharpie, Rubbermaid, like when you think about all the different brands that they have, and there's dozens more that I'm not listing, it's a really great place for mobility, right? You can move through different brands, right? Different roles, different opportunities, different areas of the organization, and work on different brands. So I think that it is a great place to pilot and to do something like this. So let's roll this clip from Ashley on kind of how they promote that culture of internal movement.
We have hired about 4,000 people in the past 2 years. And so that's a ton of new managers, a ton of new employees that we then need to also get the message out of, this is our culture. We want to encourage internal movement. And by doing that, we want to have an openness between divisions, between all of our businesses and brands, and provide that opportunity so that individuals don't feel like, okay, I can only work within the food business unit. I can't move over to writing if I have interest there. So we've really tried to communicate it. And we partnered actually very closely with corporate communications. I actually did a podcast on it just to bring awareness to the site, as well as the availability of roles and movement, and that you're able to move. So I think that's key, is getting your key stakeholders as well as your leaders of HR very engaged in how we want to approach it as a culture of Newell.
So love that. And Ashley has been, very focused on this for the past couple of years. And as you know, Devin, we all know so much has changed over the past couple of years and continues to change, right? We're still defining so much of what we do in HR and talent. And it's critical. The one thing that is undeniable, right? And we talk about this in everything here at Phenom. What's critical is that you get the experience right. You have to get the experience right. Otherwise, you will not get the adoption, right? And you will not get your recruiters using your CRM. You will not get candidates engaging with your career site. You will not get employees leveraging the full potential of your talent marketplace if the experience is terrible. So you have to get that experience right. And Ashley has been working on this and really making sure that that's the focus. So let's roll this next clip to hear about how Ashley has done that.
But when you look at the great reshuffle that we went through, as well as people looking at what they may want to do differently, the great thing about Newell is you can make it happen. We have so many different brands, as I mentioned, and divisions that you can move in between. You can also move between functions. But how do you make that easy for our internal employees? How do you make that be all in one place? And so employee experience for us has been my main focus, really, over the past year, I would say. We implemented, it's been, I think, close to 2 years now, but how can we bring out and make job alerts better? So we worked very closely with the development team with you guys to put our input there and how we can improve. We have just went through kind of an update of the entire internal site. How can we market referrals better? How can we, make our internals more aware of opportunities that are out there globally? When you have 29,000 employees, it's hard to kind of get your mind around how do we do this? How do we make it constantly visible so that they know the opportunities exist and that they can go after them, that they can talk to their managers, and they should feel comfortable talking to their managers about new opportunities. So that's been also a shift to where for a while it was a huge focus on external and getting as many external talent as we can, to a shift of how do we make our internals a focus and how do we make sure they're engaged and that they are able to see opportunities within Newell.
Yeah. So again, one of the things that is exceptional about Ashley and about her work at Newell, getting tongue-tied here, is that Ashley is actually in talent acquisition. So when you think about internal mobility, talent mobility, when you think about talent marketplaces, when you think about employee experience, a lot of times, and again, this is bias creeping in. Maybe you think like talent management, learning and development folks, like you think those are the individuals who are deeply invested in that technology or those practices. But I have to applaud Newell because Ashley's in talent acquisition and they are really investing their time, their energy, their efforts in building this employee experience because they know the benefits, the long tail benefits. And it doesn't just benefit talent management and it doesn't just benefit employee retention and employee engagement. When you have employees in a talent marketplace, one of the benefits that we've seen that really supports TA and recruiting is exposure to referrals, right? And once you have your employees really engaging with a referral program, it can start to really skyrocket the number of new leads that are coming in for your recruiters to source. So let's hear Ashley real quick, just kind of talk through some of the value from a TA perspective in investing in an employee experience that has referrals built into it.
Something we've tried to take advantage of, obviously, is the marketing campaigns that we use so much with our talent community, but we've been using them more and more internally. So, for example, one of our business units, we had quite a bit open within automation, right? This is a big area within most companies right now. So we are competing against tons of different organizations, multiple offers, et cetera. So we actually raised our referral bonus specifically for that business unit. And then we were able to market that out internally through the system.
Referral bonuses, Tom. I love it.
Love it too. Yeah. Super helpful. And again, you have that technology to support it. They're doing some amazing things over at Newell.
Yeah, no, I think it's a cost-effective way to reach talent without spending on job boards, right? You know that you're going to get folks that probably mesh with the organization already because they already do know some folks there. But Tom, we had a full season of TXL. We did all of these fantastic episodes, but I mean, the month of November, I wouldn't even say was highlighted by just TXL. What else did we have going on here at Phenom?
Yeah, so we've talked about these a bit. We touch on them, but we had these two kind of big events pillaring this particular season of TXL. So if you were following the Phenom channels, employee experience and employee engagement in talent marketplaces, like you were getting this in surround sound, right? Because it wasn't just every Thursday at 12 p.m. Eastern. We had a couple product tours. We had Experience Phenom Talent Marketplace, which was our demo day, which was amazing. That was a 90-minute event where we had 4 distinct sessions, and then we had this live fireside chat just 2 days ago with Jess Elmquist, CHRO here at Phenom, Josh Burson, everyone knows Josh, and Effie Geekus, who is at Cigna. Effie is amazing. And those 2 events were incredibly well attended. The content is just out of this world. So we're going to link up all the content so you can check these out as well too. And what I want to do is just run a few clips from those. So, this wasn't a part of TXL, but super related. And I know we're at 1:00. Eastern, right? So this is no longer the greatest show on the internet because we're now at 1:00, and I quite frankly don't know who we're competing with at 1:00, so I can't say that with confidence. But we're gonna run a few clips from those two events, and then we'll wrap things up. But to start things off, Jess Elmquist, our CHRO, incredible speaker. He's been kind of doing a good road show. He's spoken at Workday Rising, a couple different places where he's been really touting the value of employee experience. So let's do this. Justin Devitt on the ones and twos. Let's run both clips back to back of Jess kicking off our Experience Phenom Talent Marketplace Day.
In every industry, we know that the strongest companies are those investing in employee growth. We know that's the case because every employee right now is approachable and poachable, whether it's a new opportunity from a comp standpoint, a title, scope of their business, or even being able to work remotely. And so all of a sudden now, moving isn't in the decision matrix for any employee that's looking to actually make a transition. We need to be aware of that and know that that's the new talent economy. We have to be aware of that so that we can actually, inside our organizations, make sure that we have a dynamic mission and purpose, that we've created the values, and then ultimately have a platform where employees know that they can engage, plan their career, and make a home in our organization long term. We also know that we have to get retention and growth right. It becomes kind of an existential question for all of us as company leaders, because we also know the headwinds around the battle for talent and the number of jobs available comparatively to those who are looking for work is actually still incredibly skewed. So we have to be aware that once we actually have someone that has decided to join our organization, we have to make sure that recruiters and talent acquisition leaders, as well as career planning HR professionals, we have to make sure that we actually don't have a revolving door. And that's why skills are so incredibly important.
Tom, Jess there talks about skills. In the previous clip, he talked about investing in your employees. What else was covered during Experience Phenom? Because I know there was more than just those two clips.
Yeah, so in addition to Jess's opening remarks, we had two core sessions. The first one was boosting employee retention and mobility with an internal talent marketplace. So this was diving deep into the technology. So we had Lindsay Moreau, VP of Strategy here at Phenom. Super awesome. Lindsay set the table, right? She talked about why this is critical for organizations today who are struggling to evolve their employees, their workforce. And then Laura Kantorovich, our product director, she jumped in and gave us a full tour of the technology, right? So again, a talent marketplace is not just about finding your next job or your next role. It's about finding the opportunities that are going to move you forward. It could be the perfect mentor. It could be a gig or project. It could be that learning and development path, right? We integrate with Degree. We integrate with Udemy Business, right? So it's important to think about the holistic experience. And then she also touched on ERGs and Connects and all the different ways that you can engage employees beyond opportunities. And then we also talked a bit about alumni, which is really important too. Like, how can you set up your offboarding process, right? How do you set that up such that people continue to stay engaged with you, right? LinkedIn, a lot of news and a lot of headlines around layoffs. Very unfortunate to see that. But there are ways which you can conduct a layoff, but still manage to maintain a really positive relationship with those employees that you had to let go and potentially connect them with a future opportunity when things change. And I think that that's really important to do. The second session, Devin, because you asked me about both, upskilling, reskilling, and evolving your talent with workforce intelligence. So this had Cliff Jerkowitz, VP of Strategy here at Phenom. Cliff has been a TXL guest before, so if you're a fan of the show, you're familiar with Cliff. And then we had Kumar, Executive Director of Product. Kumar is amazing. So when we think about this session, it was all about skills, right? We dove deep into it. It's a hot topic right now. But we really talked about it in the sense of creating enterprise talent intelligence, right? Creating a layer of skills and competency intelligence that helps you do things beyond just helping the individual employee, right? Like, how can you see the composition of skills across the entire workforce? How can you leverage this to plan for the future? Succession planning, capacity planning. even dipping into kind of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and how you can start to measure that across the organization. So a lot of amazing stuff here for HR leaders and for talent acquisition teams that really want to get ahead of the curve and start to tap into frameworks, career frameworks that go beyond just the individual employee's experience. So check out that session as well. Both were amazing. And then, of course, that full interview with Ashley was a part of the program as well.
Yeah, no, and following that up, just 2 days ago, Tom, we had the webinar with Josh Burson, Jess Almquist, as well as Effie from Cigna. And I know we talked a little bit, Ashley mentioned it before, about the opportunity to really access employees and add them into the current CRM, right? Include them in the conversation when you're hiring. And I know that was a topic that was discussed super early within this webinar and was one of the reasons why Cigna really looked at Talent Marketplace. Am I right there?
Yeah, let's just roll the clip because let's hear from Effie's words herself.
You know, it's funny because I don't know that when we started that I was thinking about skills in particular, right? I was more thinking about, wait a minute, it's harder for our employees to identify a job inside the company than it is externally. And as I thought about, you know, the tools that we provide to our recruiters to enable them to do their jobs, they've historically been very externally focused, right? What are all these different sourcing tools and places that I can go to find someone that has this existing sort of skill set, but that they're not in the current company? And that kind of just didn't really sit right with me. I said, wait a minute, you know, we have 70,000 colleagues here at Cigna. We've got to be able to have a better way to make it easier for them.
And that they did make it easier for them. But Tom, how did they do it? How did they get to that point?
Yeah, you know, I think Effie really answered some of those questions in a fantastic way that I think all talent leaders, whether you're in talent acquisition or talent management, should consider. She received a lot of no's. She did not always have the initial buy-in, right? So one of the ways that she did it was with pilot programs, right? Like really just starting small, taking crawl, walk, run approaches, not necessarily saying we're going to invest and get our entire workforce using this platform in 30 days or 60 days. She took a very calculated and strategic approach with pilot programs. And it took a lot of persistence, right? And she talked about that. You know, she wasn't always getting direct approval or direct buy-in, and she was able to build that up over time. And part of the way that she was able to do that was by showing success and showing data each step of the way, right? So let's roll this next clip just to talk about some of the data, some of the insights that she was able to glean and able to start to get access to once she began running these pilot programs and onboarding employees into a talent marketplace.
I now can tell you that on average, our employees have, you know, a list of 24 skills per employee, right? And we've identified 33,000 unique skills. You know, these are things, even though we kind of had skills in the ecosystem informally before, we weren't really using them. And now we've got this like great insights. Yeah. And the next question is like, well, what are we going to do with this information, right? And how are we going to leverage it besides just the recruiter outreach?
Tom, those no's turned into O's pretty quick. Like, oh, we have 33,000 unique skills at this organization. So they started small and they landed on a large amount of data and information that they plan on leveraging in the future, which is super exciting. The other thing I want to ask you, Tom, is I know we heard from Jess a little bit about employee experience, talent marketplace phenom, but the elephant in the room is Josh Burson was on that webinar as well, right? I'm sure that he had some good insight. No, I know he had some good insight. Let's hear the clip from Josh.
Usually this is a cultural problem where the company has essentially business units that don't talk to each other. And it's not deliberate. It's just the way they built up, the way they grew, the way they were managed. Maybe they were acquisitions. You know, you look at a company like Amazon, I mean, there's like all these different business units that don't talk to each other. And so that's great. You know, they all get to optimize their independent business areas. but the talent strategy across them isn't being optimized. And one of the paradigms that we've come up with as we've studied this is what we call the 4 R's. Recruiting does not stand alone. Every recruiting or talent problem is recruiting, retaining, reskilling, redesigning. It isn't just that we need to fit this one person into this slot, but maybe we're losing people for another reason. So therefore, there's a problem of retention. Maybe there's a skilling problem. We can upskill people in the job. And by the way, maybe this job wasn't even defined correctly, and maybe it's too big, and maybe there's 2 people, or maybe we can define this job in a way that it's easier to fill. That 4R conversation has to happen at a senior level to break down some of these silos.
I love the 4 R's, Devin.
Yes.
This webinar, this fireside chat, it was all about turning no's into O's and R's into R's, right? And this at my friends, an hour and 10 minutes into TXL, this is when the wheels start coming off. So it's Saturday Night Live, when they have certain sketches that are so outrageously ridiculous that they can't stop laughing. They can't keep a straight face. I think we're at that point in TXL. So you have to go back and watch that fireside chat. A ton of great content. We talked about Josh Burson talking about how skills is the metadata, really human metadata that drives a lot of the technology. There's so much more packed into this. It was a 45-minute real power session. So go back and check that out. But I think it's in everyone's best interest, Devin, that we wrap this up, that we wrap up this episode. I think our professionalism might be on the line if we push this any further.
It could be. Tom, we'll wrap it up real quick. I want to thank everyone for joining. Be sure to check out the blog for each of those individual episodes. Register for the webinar. You can access Experience Phenom Talent Marketplace now at phenom.com. Little conference I like to call I Am Phenom is rapidly approaching, so don't forget to save the dates. It is happening in late March. You can register for that as well. If all of that is too much information, you can just subscribe to the Phenom newsletter on LinkedIn now that was posted today, and you'll be able to find all of this there. Next season will be in the new year 2023. We will be covering recruiter efficiency. So definitely something that is going to happen as you begin to set those New Year's resolution. That's the 5th R for you today, about how to be better at your job. It's all going to circle around recruiter efficiency. So you won't want to miss that starting January 4th. Tom, the wheels have officially fallen off the car. The shark has been jumped to bring it back to the sitcom in the beginning. Any final thoughts before we sign off?
No, just thank you, Devin, for the opportunity to host some of these awesome guests and take over the show. You gave me the microphone, and I appreciate it. We had some great conversations, and thank you for the fun and the humor and the lightheartedness, and thank you for hopping on with me today as we recap this episode. And anybody who did stick around for an hour and 13 minutes and 11 seconds, thank you as well for your time and your attention. Even if you're watching this on the replay, I really appreciate it. We love being here, as you know, and we wouldn't do this every week if we didn't have viewers tuning in and chiming in the comments. So thank you. Yeah, this has been a blast for me from a season perspective, and always great to come on and do the wrap-up episode too.
Yeah. Thank you, everyone. Have a happy weekend, a safe weekend, and we will see you next week for a live intro outro like we always do, and in 2023 chatting about recruiter efficiency. Thanks again, Tom. I appreciate the kind words, and we'll see you soon.